Fiorella Isabel. Long time since she's been on. Great guest she was then. Independent journalist, political analyst, and host of Fiorella Isabel and the Convo Couch. What a wonderful name you have and your show has. Fiorella, welcome back belatedly to the mother of all talk shows. First of all, tell us now where you are, because the last time I saw you report, I think you were in Russia. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm in Moscow right now. I actually just got back from the West Bank, and a lot has been happening in the last few months.
What's the attitude in Moscow to what's happening in Palestine? Is it a significant issue in media, or are they so fully absorbed in the war that NATO has launched on their own borders that Palestine doesn't get much of a look in?
No, not at all. The Palestinian issue has been covered broadly by all of Russian media, and a lot of journalists who have moved here from the West have been intensively covering it because of, as you may know, obviously the issue of people who have been entirely destroyed by a totalitarian form of a fundamentalist ideology is similar. What we're looking at the Azov battalion, when we're looking at these neo-Nazi regimes that have killed the people in Donbass for now 9 years, you see the same type of sentiments, the same type of attitude in the Zionist regime in Israel. You see that same exact type of attitude. So a lot of people have empathized. As you know, though, Russia has had this has played the neutral element in the entire region. They have tried to have a relationship with Israel. There are many Russians that are living in Israel, but they also have the Muslim community. They have the Chechen community. And so Russia is a multi-ethnic federation that has tried to wage peace. But now what we've seen happening here after the Crocus City massacre and terrorist attack, we have seen people start to question why, in fact, the people that carried out this attack were specifically seemingly targeted by Ukraine and the United States military industrial surveillance apparatus. And so you see these connections, and I think you may agree that nothing has been happening in a vacuum. Everything we have seen happening in the last few months has happened in tandem. And what we see is that all roads lead to Rome, all roads lead to the United States and the CIA backing these regimes, whether it's Israel in the Middle East, whether it's neo-Nazis in Ukraine, or whether it is you have the entire history, right, of Al-Qaeda. And we see that the Russian military is currently fighting with Syria, fighting these forces of Al-Qaeda in the region, and they have been together in this battle. So why would, of course, we bring up the issue of ISIS-K? The issue of ISIS-K is brought up in a way to once again point the finger at the Muslim community, at Palestinians, at Hamas, at the greater extension. And I think that none of this is coincidental in what has happened.
I'll come back to several of those points, but just for the, I'm sure, interest of the audience, it is noticeable the number of young and talented Western journalists, particularly American journalists, who are now working in Russia. It must be quite an interesting colony. If ever I'm able to go back to Moscow, I look forward to hanging out with you in the National or one of my favorite hotels. Are you much together? Do you form, as it were, a cultural, political, journalistic colony there, working in Russia, where once upon a time we were told there's no free media in Russia. The free media is here in the West. And that's now completely reversed, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, what Paris was in the 1920s for the great artists and the great, inspirational people of the world. Moscow is that today. I mean, this is it. This is the area where you come and you really see what you are told. That what you were told your whole life, basically, that what all Americans and all Westerners have been told is a complete and total lie. You have the best transportation system in Europe that I've seen. And I've been to Europe. I've used the tube. I've been all over Europe. It doesn't compare. Moscow train systems are far superior. They're far cleaner. The city of Moscow itself is a complete and total metropolis. It is a cosmopolitan city. The American version of that, the United States tries to paint, is that Moscow and Russia is a gas station with nuclear weapons. That it is simply the image of Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union, where it was in a dire state. But what has happened since is has completely changed, and people need to know this. And it's not just Moscow. You can go to St. Petersburg. You can go to Novosibirsk, which is near Siberia. You can go to the Far East in Vladivostok. You can see the development, and there's so much industry here, which kind of shows you that this may be why the United States is interested in Russia so much, and NATO has been pushed as this contingent to completely destroy the Russian Federation and to balkanize it, as of course they intended to do with the Soviet Union, because there's so much undeveloped, untapped potential for industry here. They have so many natural resources. And even what you see in the Donbass, the land there is extremely fertile. And I've been there several times as well. And what I've seen is the resilience of Russians in rebuilding. For example, Mariupol, now they're rebuilding Sevastopol. These are areas in the Donbass region. And the knowledge of Russia for Americans it's just limited to the Cold War. It's limited to villains on propaganda films that we see and even on video games. But it doesn't show the beautiful culture that they have, museums after museums, restaurants, shops, a lot of these things. And alone, that is not significant only, but it is just the community of people. They're more of a collectivist culture. You see people coming together after the Crocus massacre, which is why you can't 9/11 Russia in this way. You can't divide them. And you also see the poignant history of the Russian people, where they've had to fight Nazis during the Great Patriotic War and lost millions of people, to, of course, then the Maidan revolution, the Maidan coup that really killed tens of thousands. And now you're seeing this war in Ukraine, which, of course, we know that the United States, France, and NATO are belligerent in starting a global war by sending actual troops, even though we know that there are already mercenaries there. And it seems like things have gotten so terrible that people are coming and seeing this for themselves and being blown away. Everybody's blown away by the metro. Everybody's blown away by what they see, and just how beautiful of a country it really is. And I really hope more people can come to Russia and see for themselves, because I was told not to come to Russia. I was told to not go to many places, but I think the best thing you can do as a journalist is go to the places you're talking about.
I really hope you get to a free Odessa and you'll see a hitherto unrevealed jewel in the Russian crown. In former times, I was a frequent visitor there. Let's go back to the Middle East, if we may. Fiorella, I'm so old, I remember when the Soviet-Syrian Friendship Treaty was signed. It's well over 50 years ago now. The Soviet Union, successor state Russia, and Syria are allies for more than half a century. The Israeli forces are almost daily, certainly weekly, attacking Syria and attacking other countries in Syria. There must come a point, however full Russia's hands are elsewhere, there must come a point at which Russia feels the need to defend Syria more comprehensively. And I know some Russian troop movements, weapons movements, and observation posts towards the occupied Golan Heights recently. I'm wondering if you sense any hardening of Russia's position towards these Israeli attacks on their longtime ally, Syria.
Well, absolutely. I mean, not only are Russians and Syrians fighting the Al Qaeda forces together, and these forces that have been, of course, weaponized by both Israel and the United States. As you recall, not recently, Syria was attacked both by these forces and Israel as well. So, precisely this bombing of the Iranian embassy in Damascus signaled, I believe, a turning point for Russia because Russia operates according to diplomatic international law. As we all have seen, they have been very restrained in their reactions towards what the United States and NATO have done, but restrictive in that sense. But nevertheless, they have been planning their moves very carefully, only focusing on the special military operation as a form of targeting Ukraine's military and, of course, the military of NATO that is sent there. They haven't really focused ever on gaining some sort of revenge or attacking civilian populations, contrary to what the media says. But in terms of the Israeli and Israel question, that is, as I said in the beginning, it is a very difficult position for Russia because they have tried to play the neutral party in the entire relationship. And now, when you see that Israel, of course, obviously, has been committing a genocide in Gaza, they have been attacking Syria and Lebanon constantly. They have been very honest and open about their desire to expand in the region, that it's not going to stop with Gaza because we know this isn't about Gaza. So they see this, and then they see something that I think Russia, specifically the Kremlin, takes very seriously. The attack on a diplomatic a symbol, on an embassy that's unprecedented, that is something that they are not going to forgive Israel for. This is something that violates not only international law, but it violates the Vienna law. It violates so much of what they stand for. Russia and China have always been talking about the two-state solution, the 1968 borders, that sort of thing. What the UN pretty much does is what they follow. But now it seems, I mean, I think it was clear to all of us for a long time that Israel doesn't care about any international law, that Israel doesn't care what everybody else thinks because they are never punished. They act with impunity and there is no punishment to them. So I think this will mark a turning point because this is now targeting potentially them. And again, in the background of the Crocus City Hall terrorist attack, you can't not question that perhaps all of these terror attacks are in some way connected. And, you know, I don't represent the Russian Federation in any way, but what I do think as analyzing this is that in respecting diplomacy and respecting international law, there must be a change. And I've said this for a long time. Russia is going to have to make a decision in terms of where they stand. And we know that the United States is Israel's biggest ally. So we can pretty much predict with a certain amount of confidence that Russia is going to go in the direction of standing with the Syrian people.
Finally, you mentioned it there, the attack on the Crocus Theatre. What's the current state of the investigation there? I see some people are still being arrested and brought to court, people who've been involved in the finance and the weaponizing and so on. This is a crime so heinous, so grave, that it will mark the Russian people forever. It will never be forgotten. How is the investigation going? And is it widely covered in the media?
Well, yeah, the investigation is ongoing. I mean, they have been arresting everybody that is connected to these attacks. Now, Russia didn't show their cards immediately. This is how they act. The intelligence here basically allowed these people to try and get away and cross over to the Ukraine border in order to spy on them, really hear what they were saying, and then, of course, started arresting the main perpetrators in this case. And something I want to point out of all of this is, the specific group of people were majorly from Tajikistan. They were Tajiks. And this was a carefully selected group of people, knowing that they mostly represent the blue collar working class in Russia. They're immigrants. And there seems to me like an attempt to create a sort of a fight within the Russian people, within the Russian Federation, to turn them against each other, because they haven't been able, let's be honest, to beat them on the battlefield. They haven't been able to go after Russia at all. Russia has not only just captured Avdiivka, they have been expanding and liberating all these territories. Simultaneously, Vladimir Putin came off of a great interview with Tucker Carlson, where the world was able to see, because of Tucker's wide platform, all of the things that they thought of Putin come to question. And then on top of that, Putin came out of a 87% election where he was popular, and especially in the new territories in the Donbass. And then you have, of course, the issue of sanctions and BRICS and all of that going for Russia, where they have really said, we don't need the West anymore. We're looking to the East, and that's where they're going. And so obviously there had to be something to try to discombobulate and destabilize Russia. And that, I believe, was the attempt of these people, the puppet masters behind these attacks, who obviously, if Ukraine is there, we know Ukraine doesn't walk without the United States. And so the way Russia has been covering this is not only, of course, going after the specifically designated people who have been tasked to carry this out for money, who are really the pawns of all of this, but also going after the United States, going after Ukraine. They have, from the beginning, they knew that the US media and the State Department saying ISIS-K did it was a red flag. Maria Zaharova called it out. She said the reaction was very interesting, and it just didn't make any sense. And so what you see in Russian media is not only covering precisely who's behind these attacks, but also who is behind the people that were hired to commit these attacks. And as you said, the Russian people will remember this for a long time, but it will not, as from what I've seen, the thousands of people coming in basically at this point and showing their support either by blood donations or bringing flowers to the site of Crocus City, of City Hall. You see that camaraderie, that resilience of the Russian people. And you see that this isn't going to break them. This isn't going to divide them. They have restricted themselves from falling for this sort of thing that the United States has done to many countries. But again, Russia isn't any other country. And the United States, I think, miscalculated. And if you don't want to say the United States, you want to say whoever is behind all of this, the apparatus of it all. They miscalculated, because Russians have gone through so much, as I said, and this is not going to stop them from coming together. If anything, it actually increased the unity in the people here as a Russian people, because what people need to understand about Russians is that they see themselves as Russians first and foremost. There's many ethnicities here, many different beliefs, many different religions, unlike what you're told, and you're allowed to disagree with people. But overall, they are Russians. They are not there to be divided. And I think that is what we've seen the most out of all of this, and it will not be forgotten.
Fiorella Isabel, neither will this interview be forgotten by our audience. Thank you very much indeed. Wonderful to see you in such fine voice, and let's meet again soon.